Welcome to the Currency of Grief, the podcast where we confront two of society's most taboo topics, death and money. My name is Justin Weidenfeld, and I'm here to serve as your grief financial officer, guiding you through the complex and emotional journey of what happens when money and mortality collide. Whether you're navigating the aftermath of losing a loved one, looking for practical advice on handling pre- and post-death planning, or simply just wanting to start those hard conversations about legacy while you still can, this space is for you. Together, we'll hear real-life stories from real-life people who have navigated the intersection of grief and money and come out the other side. Our guests will share their stories, practical insights, valuable advice, and moments of clarity so that none of you have to navigate this alone. I'm grateful you've decided to join us on this journey. Now let's dive in. So without further ado, let's meet our guest for today's podcast. She's a 4-year, 4-bead experience camps counselor, a victorious college league dean, Midwex, our Michigan camp's resident stand-up comedian, coming in at 5 feet tall and an undisclosed weight, Ari Cohen!
Thank you. Starting with the Miami Heat this season. Very excited.
Gotta do it. But listen, in reality, I met Ariana through my first college friend. She was born in New York. She was raised in South Florida. And she got into her dream school, the University of Michigan, only to find out her dad lost all of her college savings betting on stocks. And she found this out as he was going into a life-saving surgery. Currently, Ariana lives in New York City. She is truly one of the most fun and caring people I know, and a shining light into every room she walks into. Ari, thanks so much for joining me on the Currency of Grief.
Thanks, Justin. I'm so glad that's recorded. It's my new ringtone.
I'm sure you can save that. I might have to do that for more guests if you start the trend.
Yeah. No, very happy to be here. Very honored to be asked to come and speak. I like to tell everyone to grab their shovels in case I trauma dump a little bit. But yeah, you hit it on the head. My family's whole life really got turned upside down back in February 2015. My dad shared his stage 4 cancer diagnosis with us after who knows how long he had even really known himself. That's going to be a big theme of today, secrets. And then after getting multiple opinions from doctors, went up to the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York and was doing a tumor removal surgery. My mom and my uncle, my dad's brother, his only sibling, only family member really, were with him when he was going in, which he found to be an opportune time to share that yes, he had made some bad decisions in the stock market. He was a day trader as his occupation. After having a career as an accountant, he was a CPA for a period of time and then started working for himself. We moved, like you said, from New York to Florida back in 2005. So at that point, my mom stopped working. She had always been the primary breadwinner. And she felt that she had saved up enough from her work to take care of her family and have everything that we needed for the times that mattered, including college. And my dad took over over our accounts, over my younger brothers and my account, over my grandparents, my mom's parents' accounts, and would use the funds at his discretion to invest in the stock market and hopefully, double, triple them, whatever the optimal number was in his mind. And after a couple of few bad mistakes, he dug a deeper and deeper hole. And it all came out as his illness was revealed. And at that point, our life was turned upside down, not only because my dad and a key figure in a lot of people's lives was sick with not too much insight into what would happen from there, but also my family's life was turned upside down in so many other ways. My mom, after 10 years, has to go back to work in a very different environment, post, the digital age. We're in the middle of the digital age. Um, my brother and I had a lot of uncertainty about our lives and our future. And then alongside all this, we're all trying to care for um, an emotionally unstable and now very unhealthy man. So, forced my brother and me to grow up quite quickly, have to have some serious conversations. And then in November 2020, or excuse me, 2018, my dad ultimately did die, from his cancer. So after 3.5 years, and now here we are, almost 7 years later in a couple of weeks. And I do miss my dad every day, but the one thing I really am still carrying in terms of, my, aside from just basic grief, is, I mean, all three of us, my mom, my brother, and myself, are still dealing with the financial implications of his poor decision making and secrecy in, in terms of life decisions, in terms of lifestyle. I'm coming to now from an apartment my mom is renting in West Palm Beach. They sold my childhood home back in 2017 to help with paying for the medical bills and just expenses. You mentioned I got into the University of Michigan, go blue. I ended up writing an appeal letter to the Office of Financial Aid and Student Assistance, and explaining my situation once I got accepted, and how my family's financial situation was probably going to be what kept me from going to my dream school. And um just which just, like, obviously sucks just hearing that, but also sucked for me at the time, where, like, at 18 years old, it feels like your whole life is just you working hard and trying to build up to college. And obviously, college is not one size fits all. There are a lot of other avenues you can go down post, high school, but for me, that was always my plan. And I made it, my job was just to do well in school and make it happen for myself. And my parents always reassured me they'd figure out the other parts of it. Um, so wrote a letter, got 50% financial aid covered by the University of Michigan. Very grateful that my words resonated with someone who read them. And then worked hard to do well in school. So for my freshman year, only 50% was covered. And, the first month of school, little Ari Cohen walked into that office and said, "What do I need to do to get the other 50% covered?" And they said, "Do well." And I was like, okay, that's what I've been hearing up until now also. So,
Hmm. Yeah,
um,
let me
yeah,
call a timeout right there. So,
yeah,
thank that I mean, thank you for first off sharing your story. Um, it seems like a lot. So, I think one of the things that stood out to me, and one of the themes of the podcast, is the people who end up being guests on the podcast who have these stories, are thrusted into financial responsibility. And I know Ari Cohen you know, post Barry, post your dad, post, when did we meet? Post 2018, you are a doer, and you take matters into your own hands. Um, and so that's just a theme that I want to point out, on
a
the
great one.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may, I think it's because as a kid, I mean, your parents are supposed to take care of you. And I do, like, a lot of this podcast is going to be speaking negatively about my dad, unfortunately, just because of the topic. But, like, at the end of the day, he really was an amazing man. I just want to make sure I do say that. And my mom is my best friend. Like, sharing a bed. Like, I don't have a bedroom here. I'm sleeping with my mom this weekend. Like, so I did have amazing parents. They both came from nothing, worked very hard to get anything, like, their dreams were achieved, and it is a parent's role to take care of their kids. But I think because of the lack of control I had over anything, and then again to just have my world turned upside down in so many different ways, it's forced me to really, I like to control the controllables. And I also have anxiety. I'm sure it chucks no one after hearing just the last 5 minutes. But that's a good way to help manage it, just really focusing on the things I can impact. And that has made me a doer. And
Yeah.
it's a
So
great way.
let's talk about um you know, I want to talk about your childhood, and it sounds like I've heard you say this in the past, which was, school is your number one job. Let us worry about as parents, taking care of our kids. You go focus on school. And so, what was your dad and what was your family like growing up?
Growing up, I'm the oldest child. I definitely, I think, played a large role in the household stemming from that. Like my job number one was absolutely school, 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 school. I had two academics as parents, and they just, again, I think they saw how they worked their way up, and they saw just how big of a role or how easier it could be if you went down different avenues in life to kind of swim with the current instead of against it. My role number two growing up was definitely being that good example, so to say, for my brother, however you want to define good example. So it was just a lot of pressure. That sounds very woe is me. I definitely grew up very privileged. I wanted for nothing, which is something also, it's a big takeaway for me.
So, your mom worked for a number of years, was the main breadwinner, and, made a good enough living and saved enough to be able to support you and your brother and your family. And then so she was able to like stay home with you and take care of you guys. And then your dad, as a professional day trader, was like, let me take over the finances from here. Um, and let me try to make this nest egg that your family has built up, let me try to grow it, which is normal. I mean, the market, S&P 500 will grow 8% a year. There's a rule of 72, which sorry, I'm boring people, but
No, go for it.
every 9 years that money potentially would double at 8%. If it's 7 years, it'll double every, or 7%, it'll double every 10 years. And so if you can, grow faster than you're spending and you have a nest egg that's supporting the lifestyle that you want, then, really that is financial independence, working because you want to, not because you have to. And it sounds like family was important to both your mom and your dad, and they wanted to take care of you.
And my dad did very well for a very long time. It's just unfortunately the tail end just made some mistakes and couldn't recover. Just kept throwing more and more money into the pot. Him and my mom had to designate an amount. It was agreed upon for funds to be used for trading, and then he just started going outside of that.
Yeah. Well,
My
let me talk
Yeah.
about, yeah. So, out of your overall experience, what would you say, you know, I'm imagining, your dad sitting in a hospital bed being wheeled into potential surgery, and then your mom being next to him, and he goes, "Hey, by the way, like, here's the login to Fidelity or whatever it was in a couple of years prior. Like, we don't have any money." And then saying like, "See you later." So like, hopefully I see you on the other side. Like, what was it like?
um, besides obvious shock, honestly infuriating. It feels manipulative in a way because, first of all, again, love my dad. That was my mom's money. So like, besides the like, obviously, what's hers is his, is theirs, is ours. The family, they were married, but she worked very hard to earn that. My mom had a lot of people, her parents relying on her. My mom had a handicapped brother who was still with us at the time. Um, and again, my grandparents had nothing also. So my mom has a lot more people relying on her, and for my dad's ego to just play such a big role in that, and for all the secrets to really impact so many people, our whole familial unit, is infuriating. And then it feels manipulative because how can you be mad at this person whose life is so fragile at the moment? Who is, like you said, about to be wheeled into a surgery where they're giving such low odds that he's going to make it off the table. So, for his potential last words to be something so negative, something that isn't not tell Ariana and Miles I love them, like here's his brother there with my mom, like for it it's infuriating. I'm just gonna keep using that word because also then spoiler alert, my dad made it off the table. He did live for another 3.5 years, like I said, after that, but this was he was still sick. He was still very sick. He was in and
What
out.
was your relationship with him, in
Yeah,
years, 1
yeah.
through 18 and
So
then in.
yeah, I always say when things with my dad were good, they were really good. Like we do these days. I'm no doctor. I definitely did. Although I loved school, med school was never in the cards for me. So I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna. This is pure speculation. We do think my dad had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, because when things were good, they were very good, and when they were bad, it was home was a scary place to be. It was just a lot of verbal altercations, and um, so it's tough then as you're growing up. And like also these are learned behaviors in a way. So here I am fighting fire with fire, which just caused more and more conflict for teenager me and my dad, who was so stubborn and insistent that he's telling me what's best for me. And this is normal parts of being a child, yes, but there was no real balance and no accountability on my dad's end for when things were awry or when he could have been wrong or when maybe he should have said something in a different way or used different words. And that was also an overarching theme when he was sick. And we none of us were allowed to express our anger or feelings about his financial missteps because he was ill. And I obviously, more than anything, wish he wasn't sick at the time, not just so we could have had the conversations that my mom, that Miles, that I deserve to have to kind of voice just our feelings around the repercussions of his actions, because that is still something to this day I'm working on facing. I'm not only like I like good way to put it. I'm not only grieving the loss of my dad, I'm grieving just the thought of what my life was going to be like all the dreams and hopes I had as a kid. And of course, I mean, on paper, I still achieved them. I graduated from the University of Michigan. I moved straight to New York City. I am on a career path I always dreamed of. I'm working on the business side in the retail industry, and these were all the things I wanted for myself, and that my parents, I would not have achieved without my parents pushing me and behind me. But it's definitely been a lot more of a struggle along the way
Yeah.
than the deal I, unofficially agreed to at 13.
Well, the
Well, the
deal
deal.
you had, you thought you grew up with, like the life that you envisioned with yourself. And I think for better or for worse, a lot of guys are short term visionaries. They're like, all right, where's my next meal? And I think 10-year-old girls plan their weddings at 25 years old. So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. Not 25. Let's be nice.
in today's day and age, whatever it might be,
I'm older
maybe
than
I'm just
that. And
um, but I think, yeah, that's super challenging. And I was going to ask what you're grieving, and you're grieving not only the loss of your dad, but also the life that you had envisioned for yourself, the security. And now, you know, one of the main, my experience as well was, I lost my dad, a role model person that I looked up to. I also found out that, he wasn't perfect on the financial and the business side. And I had to navigate life without him and without, a specific, like a protector of the family, a supporter of the family. No, I had to step up into that role. And as the older sibling, you did as well. And so, what conversations did you wish you had with your dad?
there are still so many unanswered questions that the three of us will just never be able to answer or address or anything. So I really do wish we had held my dad accountable, just baseline accountability. We were all due so much more than we all deserved apologies for myriad of things. But this being one of them, and I wish we had really just been strong enough to just sit my dad down and force him to have the conversations he was avoiding with all of his might, with whatever he could have done. Um, and it's not even about the nitty gritty. I mean, like, I'm, s- I'm, s- I love knowing, like, there really is power of knowledge. And so again, be like having issues with control and wanting to just control and protect everyone in my life. Like, I'm sure it would bring some peace knowing, a timeline or exact amounts or like what'd you take from whom or where'd you put it or whatever. But like, that's not going to change anything. So I really just wish I could have told my dad, like, hey, you messed up. This is the impact it had on me. I wish, like, I even could have this conversation today because another thing I'm now missing in life, you said, like, the security, the stability, all these things are so important, especially in 2025 when there's not much of that in the world. And, like, again, you have to control what you can. And there's so little on that list for what I can control now. I'm also grieving my peace of mind. My mom and brother are down here. That like there's we're also struggling in our own ways to find that stability. And I definitely hold a lot of guilt being in New York, same as how I did going away to college, knowing that my dad's recovering from the surgery back home. I'm leaving my mom and brother behind with someone who's unstable and in a situation where just things again the rug just got pulled out from under us, and unfortunately that happened a couple more times in the 10 years since my dad shared his diagnosis. So peace of mind, I'm feeling a lot of guilt, and those are things I just wish I could share, I could talk about, I could communicate, and like I'm in therapy, huge proponent. Shout out Dr.
You're also a
Nikki.
guest on the
And I
currency.
guess on Currency of Grief, I joined the share circles, which absolutely helps just to know that you're not alone. It's definitely a taboo topic, talking about grief or money. In a previous life, I was in a sorority at the University of Michigan, shocker. But during Rush, when I was already part of the sisterhood, and going through it, interviewing new people, we said the four B's that we weren't allowed to talk about. And it was bills, money, number one, always, politics, boys, like politics at the time, the B was Barack, but boys and booze. And so to have bills on that list, I like to joke now that booze is really booze, like ghosts, because I don't want to talk about grief. And it's like in my workplace, if I someone new's joining, I say, oh yeah, my mom and brother live down in Florida. Immediately they're like, oh, but where's your dad? I'm like, 6 feet under a paramus. Like, what do you want me to say? So these are definitely two very stigmatized topics that people shy away from in just common life. So I commend you and what you're doing with the currency of grief and just challenging people to have these difficult conversations with their loved ones while they're still around. There are definitely a lot of things. Again, going back to your parents are supposed to protect you. There are a lot of other things I think my parents could have done, or not. Again, not placing blame. I would never ever really speak ill about, especially my mom. But there are things that they could have done just to protect my brother and me in a financial element that I don't think they ever thought about, considering maybe their upbringing and how it really was. Like you said, like they were just worried about short term, never long term planning growing up. So, um,
Let me ask you a
yeah,
question. Sorry, do
yeah.
you want to finish that point? I'm sorry.
No, 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 go.
Let me ask you a question. With regards to like your financial knowledge and you know, I don't know is a perfectly fine answer, but you mentioned ego and bipolar, two characteristics that you would describe your dad. As we transition into like the financial section of this podcast, you know how ego and bipolar can impact someone's investing, habits or strategies.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna play more on the ego just because very relatable. Everyone has an ego. And absolutely, if you are down looking for that quick fix, the quick confidence boost, throwing $5 or $10, even to make it more attainable, throwing $5 or $10 on the Dolphins game today. Thankfully, they won, so I hope your $5 or $10 was doubled. But just it's a quick fix. It's that quick serotonin release, everything like that. And if you're down, I've seen a lot of people then double down and try to make it back. And that really is how I was able to, at 18, conceptualize just going from, whatever number it was all the way down to zero. Um, you hear of losses all the time, and like again, two CPAs as parents, I was somewhat familiar, even though I was so shielded from this topic growing up. I was never really taught any type of financial literacy. I would have part-time jobs growing up, but then I'd spend that cash as soon as I got it on clothes or shoes or whatever it was, because I my essentials taken care of. That was just the cherry on top. So I definitely understand how ego can get in the way of
Yeah.
making sound decisions. And then in terms of just big picture, how bipolar disorder could play into that, you have these manic episodes where you can really just go off the deep end, and just really spend well beyond your means. It doesn't, not even exclusive to the stock market. It could be anything. It could just be a brand new TV, a brand new car, going on a shopping spree, whatever it may be, because um, you're just you're not keeping yourself in check.
Yeah. I think from a bipolar standpoint, let's start there. Bipolar is characterized by, excessive or extensive mood swings. So, and to lead to depression. And, when you're depressed, I've been very sad, been depressed through grief, through life, through work, whatever it might be.
Most
You want
people,
to try,
yeah.
yeah, you want to try to find a quick fix. So maybe it's going out to get a win or going out to buy something. So as a professional day trader, you might be like, all right, let me, try to get a quick win by betting on this stock. Additionally, you mentioned doubling down, and I think of ego as overconfidence. So when you invest in one specific item, and this isn't an investing podcast, this isn't investing advice, but when you invest in one specific thing, let's use a company that everybody knows, Apple. There is a likelihood that that company can go to zero. When you invest in the entire market, there's a very small likelihood that all the stocks in the entire market go to zero. If that happened, that means like, an asteroid came and destroyed the earth and like we have bigger problems. But let's say you're investing in a stock, one single stock, and it's going down. People who have, overconfidence will either hold because they want to believe in their winners, or they'll double down at a time like this. And if it's one stock, then it literally could go to zero. It could go bankrupt, or it could make a turn back up. But it sounds like, um, you know, it wasn't a diversified portfolio. It was more, betting on single stocks or options or whatever it might be. And there's a potential. That's why, you have to be a professional in order to do that. And there's a potential for that to go to zero, and it sucks.
Absolutely. And one thing, because obviously, learning as a kid, you go into school and everyone's like, "Oh, what do your parents do?" Blah blah blah. Like day trading was something I had a lot of questions about, did not grasp at first. Um, so how my mom always explained it to me was that my dad was really good at predicting trends and like just having a pulse on these bigger market upswings or downturns, and was able to really anticipate when they would happen. And that was kind of just like what gave us all faith and let us all believe that. They're
It's really
obvious.
hard.
It's hard.
It's
It's
like
hard.
nearly impossible to
Yeah.
predict the future. And if
Yeah.
I did, I'd probably be on a golf course somewhere, even though I am wearing my golf
Yeah. That
attire.
master's hat, Justin.
Exactly. Um, all right. So speaking of your mom, what was it
Yeah.
like seeing your mom go back to work after 10 years?
I mentioned my mom's my best friend. We've always been very close. I'm the oldest child. I am her mini me. And she calls me Debbie 2.0. Like, really, she and I have always been very close. She and I are two big empaths, and definitely it feels like sometimes just share one like heart. Like it's like twins and all. Like I guess that would be a comparison. Like when my mom hurts, I am sharing that pain. Um and seeing my mom hurt for so many different reasons. Her husband getting sick, her life being so uncertain, her kids being so scared, um, all at once was definitely tough. And again, I mentioned then I go away. And it felt very selfish. And that was something I really grappled with for all 4 years of college. And I shared growing up, I was definitely, there's a lot that comes with being an oldest child. And I very much felt like I couldn't be contributing any more suffering to the family because of everything that we were now going through, and that was the way I could help my mom, by really taking care of myself, by doing well in school, and like that way she, when everyone is asking her, how are you doing, blah blah blah, I would hear her on the phone and she's like, Rihanna's doing amazing, loving Michigan, blah blah blah. And so I wanted to give her that good
That's
piece
what
of,
you wanted. That's
yes,
what you
yes,
wanted to talk about. It's like, I'm dealing with this very challenging aspect of my life on this
yeah,
end, but Ariana is doing great. Like Ariana's our golden
yeah.
child. Like I'm sure your brother's amazing as well, but
Miles is great in his own way, but Miles, yeah. One thing, and I really don't want to touch on it too much, it's Miles' story to share, but my dad got sick in 2015. Around 2017, it's revealed through a seizure that my brother has his own medical condition that is something he's going to be coping with for his whole life. So that is also something that impacts his daily life. And again, we were talking a lot in the beginning about, like, as kids, we set these goals out for ourselves and we envision our lives being a certain way, and we're just always working towards that. Um and Miles's life, definitely for reasons outside of his control, um, has panned out differently.
Yeah.
And that also brings an interesting financial element into it from a planning standpoint, because my brother's biggest fear now is one day being a financial burden on someone. And so that definitely informs his decision making different than mine, where, like, obviously, if I was so concerned about saving every dime I'm making, I'd be living in cities that weren't New York. Whereas my brother is in this apartment with my mom, and they are living a very modest lifestyle these days. And it's refreshing and inspiring because it reminds you again what this whole experience definitely showed us, that life is so much more than what you have in the bank, or how big your house is, or where you're vacationing as a family over the holidays. And it's just a matter of having that family and having the love, um, and just being able to be with each other.
Definitely.
Um,
So, I was going to ask,
Please.
what financially and logistical role you took on. And, post diagnosis, it sounds like you had to start fully supporting yourself, and you really didn't want to be a burden
Yeah.
to your family as well.
Yeah.
So go
I
for
don't
it.
want to be a burden financially or emotionally. So the big first step of that was figuring out college tuition. University of Michigan is a great school, and unfortunately has a price tag that reflects that. Got some financial aid, worked very hard my freshman year, to get the grades necessary to have that remaining tuition covered by the school, or what was considered a provost grant, from the dean. So that was another thing I set out to achieve, and proud to say I did. So that helped with college for the rest of my time at Michigan, which was a big weight lifted for my parents. But yeah, continuing since I've really been financially supporting myself since then, which is a challenge in a city like New York. I wish I could say I was a bigger person, but it I find myself very envious at times, and that's
Yeah.
something I need to work on. But and then it brings me back to the anger at a person who I can't talk to about it, um, and it's something I and my mom is she has much more life experience than me, obviously. She and grew up in a much different household than I did. So she is a bigger person than I, in the sense where she has released her anger. But it's also, again, not wanting to be a burden. I don't want to bring her back to that dark place by talking to her about it, even. Again, shout out Dr. Nikki there for me with the good things and the bad. A community like this, but especially now, being further out from my grief, I challenge myself to only talk about the positives from my dad, and this is the biggest negative. So it's a matter of kind of finding that balance of processing my emotions the way they are warranted to be discussed and felt, but then also honoring my dad's memory and legacy, and trying to make that a positive one.
Yeah. So, your dad ended up passing away during your senior year, right? Okay. And so, you know, what was it like to lose your dad during the last semester of college? And then as you're shifting into adulthood, as you're navigating adulthood, the job experience, whatever, like, your path, what would you say, like, your top three takeaways may be, or like experiences that you had of, navigating your last semester of college without your dad, and then navigating the beginning of your adulthood and your working life without your
Yeah.
dad?
Um, Navigating the last semester, at that point, then I realized how finite everything is, not only in terms of life and death, but also in terms of life chapters and life stages. And college, I think, is a perfect example of that. You're in this it really is a simulation. It's not real world. Um, it, I could never do it again. Like, best 4 years of my life, don't get me wrong, even considering everything that was going on in my family life. But, and like, I met some of my best friends there to this day, forever. Um, and it made me who I am, and I'm proud of who I am. But my last semester of college, going back after my dad had passed, first, my mom's like, I don't care at this point what grades you get, just walk. Like, it's not
Mhm.
like I have to worry about, just walk the stage of graduation. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like I have to worry
Just
about,
get to graduation.
yeah, it's not like I have to worry about remaining the high, like, maintaining the high GPA to get tuition cover. Like, we were done with the financial aid part of it. My mom was very much like, enjoy yourself. Um,
Hmm.
and so that I did. But again, going back to the four B's that were taboo, it definitely led to me, you know, distracting myself from my grief when it was very raw, with just, the excitement of being that second semester senior and everything that's to come.
Yeah. Do you
Um,
would like? There's never a good time, but with all
yeah,
of those distractions, was it beneficial
it was
or was it?
beneficial. No, absolutely beneficial. But then it really hit like a rock at graduation. Um, when everyone's with their families and so happy. And there was a very obvious missing piece there. Um, I'm grateful. My mom and brother came to Ann Arbor for graduation. My uncle, my dad's brother came to support. My grandparents were there, who really, they have both since died post grad, but my grandparents played a big role in helping me achieve my New York dreams and, my fashion beauty world dreams. My family lived in Florida, but my grandparents were in an apartment in Queens, and would take me in every summer over college. I would get internships in the city and live for free with them because I really couldn't afford to be living and working in the city otherwise at that point. And so my grandparents really played a big role in not only the person I am today, but really helping me achieve my career aspirations. Um, which, on that note, like, my biggest takeaway for the year immediately after graduating and the 18 months after my dad died were I'm in New York City. Here I am, like, doing it. Everything I had dreamed about for, in theory, 15 years of my life. I wanted to be a fashion designer and live in New York before I even knew how to spell designer. I remember in third grade. So I'm not a fashion designer now. I had my, again, two CPAs as parents. They pushed me down a more practical route of the business side of the industry. But um, post grad, moving to New York and trying to process my grief alongside learning a new city, and navigating that, I definitely feel like I did not give myself, a reality check in a way to be like, okay, here you are, like, still maintaining this course because you can, and because, like, you're still doing everything to make it possible for yourself. But is this still, what's best for you after this huge life altering experience?
Yeah.
COVID and the pandemic, in a way, obviously many lives were lost and the entire world was turned upside down. And there's so many negatives, but just as someone who's had a rough 10 years, I need to be an optimist. And so
For
my
sure.
blessing in disguise was the opportunity to really take a beat. I came back down to Florida, um, stayed with my mom for what was supposed to be 2 to 3 weeks, ended up being 13 months. My younger brother at the time was at the University of Miami. They started doing remote learning, so he came back home too. And our blessing in disguise was being able to really just heal as a family in a way. The three of us as a unit being able to really slow down and just sit and address the grief and have the conversations we needed to have as, this new normal,
Yeah.
and make the promises to each other to kind of help repair the damage my dad had done.
Yeah. And
Not
really quickly,
yeah.
yeah, on that, I mean, did you ever talk to your mom about, the conversations that she had with your dad with regards to planning for, his eventual passing and, any aspect of, life insurance, or was there an estate plan in place? How did you mentioned earlier, your parents could have prepared a little bit better. So how did they prepare, and what conversations were had, and what would you have done differently?
Um, I can't speak too much on the conversations that were had, but I'll be very transparent about what I do know. And that includes the fact that my dad did not have a will. I think that also comes from, growing up with nothing. Like whatever my dad did have, my dad was not a very materialistic man. So I think it was very obvious, what would go where, um, in terms of the sentimental things, and then the finances would all just go to my mom Debbie and Miles and me. Um, Before my dad knew he was sick, um, as a quick financial bailout for some of the mistakes he had made in the market, he had canceled his life insurance plan for himself. Again, for the quick payout, you said earlier, when you're having those manic episodes, everything feels you're looking only short term. A lot of actions are very selfish and self motivated, and that was a big theme during my dad's 3.5 years. Where then even after we knew he was sick, a lot of what he was doing was very selfish. And
I
so,
want to,
yeah,
yeah, I want to pause
there
on
was
that.
nothing to answer
That
your question. Like in terms of, planning, there really wasn't anything done, which is a big takeaway. I'm not having kids in the too near future, but I definitely, there are certain funds and things I'm definitely going to be working hard to set in place for my future children, just to help protect them from, things outside of our control.
right, control the controllables, as you said
Control the
earlier.
controllables.
Um, yeah, your dad canceling his life insurance
Yeah.
is, I'm gonna, brutal,
Brutal.
because
And then
I
who
don't
wins?
know if there's,
Dying man. That's something. There's no going. That's just,
yeah.
yeah.
I don't know if this is before or after his diagnosis, but once he got the diagnosis, there was no way he was going to be able to, be healthy enough to get life insurance. And typically, there are policies that cover funeral expenses for 10 or $50,000, but more often than not, these policies are like the death benefit is a couple hundred to a couple $1 million. And there's definitely a chance that, having that life insurance would have covered your family even for a short future, or for college for you and Miles, or for whatever it might have been. That's
Just
really
relieve
challenging.
some of the pressure, because it really, again, my mom then had to take care of 5 other people, six including my dad. And my uncle, my disabled uncle, who I shared earlier, did pass in 2017, so February 2017, so before my dad did. So then my mom takes on um, the financial burden of that as well, supporting my grandparents, who, I mean, the worst thing I think in this life is losing a child. And my grandparents were definitely never the same after the death of my uncle. And so it's a lot on my mom. And so you're right. Like having the life and all the if there was one thing we could have, I think, changed for my dad's whole story, it wouldn't have been all of the financial shortcomings or missteps along the way. I think at the end of the day, it reminds you that life is a lot more than money, and it's about the people, not what you have. But that life insurance, like you said, that's the real kicker. Um,
Do you
just
know?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you know real quickly if your like your dad not having a will? I mean, it probably, your mom was ideally the executor of his estate, and you know, right when she's grieving and caretaking, like having to do all of that is definitely challenging, be the executor. I mean, there may have not been that much money or things to go around, but just being a CPA and then not not having a well, your mom was a CPA, but also your
Yeah.
dad, right?
Yes, yes, both
But
of
to
them.
being a CPA and not having a will, and then just thinking it's obvious that what would go where, like there's still a legal process that makes things a little bit easier. Um, Makes things a little bit easier if you do have it spelled out instead of going to court. So it adds a couple extra nuanced steps that it's the last thing you want to do. What's it like now in adulthood in New York, having grown up the way you did, but like now being surrounded by people, mostly with two parents, right? I was at a wedding this past weekend and everybody was like, at my wedding, my dad's going to do this, that my dad's going to do that. It's super challenging. But two parents and people who have, financial cushions of, a household that's working together. You mentioned envious before. Do you compare yourself to the people in these situations? And really briefly, like what advice would you give someone who maybe is in a similar situation to you?
I hate the word compare, but yeah. Like, how do you not?
But
We're
that's
all human,
normal.
it's normal. Exactly. Like, we're all humans. And it's hard not to. It's hard not to, especially because so many of us grew up in like the cookie cutter same way. And so to have such a pivotal moment in my life where everything just changed, and that not only being the financial element of it, but also like losing my parent and my family stability and that picture perfect image, as if anything's perfect, but still, um it's hard to not feel envious at times. And even like, just to take a step back, sometimes I'm envious just over watching how people seemingly breeze through. Like, honestly, I think that's what it is more so than the designer goods or the vacations or the lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's just just not having to constantly be worried about so many different things. I can't, like, I would love just one night a week where my head hits the pillow and I'm asleep.
You're not wrong.
And that's tough. And like, those are, I think, the blissful ignorance of childhood is something I also just find myself looking back on. Um, and so what I try to remind myself is just the people I do, like, I miss my dad. I don't have my dad, but there are good life lessons he did teach me, and that I do find myself tapping into on a daily basis. There are the good sides of my dad. I definitely see in my own personality. That's something I always remind myself, and I'm very grateful. I get to spend 1 week every summer, really honing in on that aspect of me and my life and my experience. Um, and I also, these are all less good life lessons at the end of the
Mhm.
day. Um,
I'm gonna actually,
yeah.
cut you off and
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and harp on that question.
Yeah.
How has this experience, both your dad's health
Hmm.
rise and fall, as well
Yeah.
as, the financials of your family rise and
Yeah.
fall? How has this experience changed your approach to life and your approach to planning?
My approach to life definitely reminds me what really does matter. Um, and also
What matters?
the people.
Mm,
Like, what good is having a mansion if you're the only one in it? You know,
yeah.
like, we could go on cliche after cliche. It's about the people that you are spending life with, and nothing feels as good as the biweekly paycheck hitting, and not from the financial element of it or like the stress reduction, but like, yeah, I did that. Like, here I am again, like, despite everything, like, I'm so proud of where I am at life, where my brother is, where my mom is, and the example she has set for the two of us. And I'm so excited to one day have my own family because that's now the next street. I spent my whole childhood working up to this dream I had of myself moving to New York City and like living this Carrie Bradshaw lifestyle. And now this new dream I'm working towards is having a family and being able to instill the values and provide for them in the way that I'm now ideating and realizing and adapting based on the past 10 years of my life and how things, really can change at the drop of a hat or what feels like the drop of a hat. And so in terms of planning now, I'm in a pivotal point in my career as well, like to really get into the financial nitty gritty. I love my job. I love what I do, but one of those things like hindsight being 2020, where I should have taken a beat and thought about, what about my plan should have changed or could have changed once my whole life changed. I never had the personality for banking per se. My parents always pushed me to become an accountant as well, and then quickly realized I was not ever going to just sit in the cubicle and crunch away at the numbers. But perhaps I should have pivoted into a career that's more, known for having that higher salary. New York's an expensive place to live, and right now I'm looking to set up the next stage of my career, staying in the industry, but pivoting into more really on the go-to-market strategy side of the fragrance and beauty industry right now, and I'm pivoting more into the sales and client management side because, from working in the industry for the past 7 years, I've learned that's where more of the money is. So I may not, I think I'll be good at it. I think I'm going to enjoy it, but it's definitely not as glamorous as what I have been doing. I feel like having, life comes with sacrifices. And what's more important to me now is the dream of the life I want to provide for my future children and family. And I need to get behind the driver's seat and really, put my foot on the gas to make that
Yeah.
happen.
I'd love to, hit on a couple of points that you mentioned. So, in summary, from a career standpoint, when you're thrusted into financial responsibility because of a loss, you know, there's an element of, do I need to get the highest paying job? What do I need to make myself happy? And first off, I think you definitely should be celebrated for accomplishing everything that you've set your mind to in the midst of these challenges. For example, getting into Michigan, getting the 100% full ride after the first year and achieving those grades, walking, getting to New York City, joining the industry that you want. And what I think a lot of people, just having this conversation with my girlfriend, what a lot of people struggle to do is, look out into the future. If I go into a career and I make, $60,000 a year and my lifestyle costs $50,000 a year, you're not going to be able to save the amount that you could if you're in a career where you're making, $100,000 a year and your lifestyle is 50, or in a career that you're making $150,000 a year and your lifestyle is 75, $80,000. Wealth isn't how much you're making; it's the difference between how much you're making and how much you're spending, how much your lifestyle costs.
And unfortunately, coming the downside to living in New York is you have to spend more. I walk outside, I breathe, and there goes $50.
Exactly.
So
Well, I hope you have a money breathing breath the rest of your
yeah,
life. Um, I also want to highlight, growing up, we talked about this earlier and offline, never really talking about the money or the stressors. And now you and your family are able to have very transparent conversations on money and the struggles together. And I think COVID, although really difficult, was a blessing for a lot of families because there was just not a lot to do. I mean, my golf game got really good, but besides that, I really thought about what I wanted in life. And now, as you enter this next stage, you're really thinking about the long term, how you want to set your family up in your future and your financial well-being, given these life-changing experiences around your dad, your money, and your family. And so as we, this has been incredible. There's so many lessons that people can take away from the conversation that we've been having. But are there any final thoughts or lessons that you want to leave our audience with?
If something feels off, trust your gut. Um, I just, I guess, like to torture myself for fun. So I replay a lot of different things from my childhood. Just not that it was ever my role to step up or say something, but just really trusting your gut. If you feel that, a loved one, doesn't have to be a parent, doesn't have to be a family member, but just if something feels off or the math isn't quite adding up, you know, act with caution and with care, but do let if something feels off, it's because it probably is. And just don't be scared to have these difficult conversations, I think is the other part of it. Um, because if I had just, you know, spent 10 minutes of discomfort with my dad between the 7 to 10 years ago, I would have saved myself a lot of heartache for presumptively the rest of my life. So that's also the other big takeaway from this. Just having anger so closely intertwined with my grief is something I'm going to have to process and address, like really forever. And that is not fun. That again, this is not the life. This is not my dad's legacy. There's he was so much more than his financial missteps, and although it's made me, my mom, and brother much stronger and much closer, um, his grief, like the grief of him alone, would have done that. I think this was just an extra little challenge, a little fun sauce on top. So just the big takeaways are to trust your gut. Absolutely. If something looks off, it probably is off, or feels off, it probably is off. And then to have those tough conversations. I'm going to be addressing financial literacy and family planning, I think, much differently. And this is just, that's how it's supposed to be. Also, that is not by any means a dig at my parents. I think that this is just something that, like, generation after generation, we're also the therapy generation, so take with that what you will. But I think we all try to break a cycle. Everyone's cycle is different, but there were a lot of things my parents didn't talk about, like the 4 Bs from that sorority rush I had in my households growing up as well. Like, my parents never talks about politics in front of us. My parents never really talks about money, the downsides to, anything that was going on. Even like before my dad was sick, my uncle required a lot of help and support financially and otherwise. And that's life. And I like there are certain things, yes, kids don't need to know everything, but I do think that these are important life lessons. And I was privileged not only, in the lifestyle way, but also in the not having to worry way. There were much more eloquent ways I'm sure I could have said that, but I'm not saying I'm going to torture my kids with having to worry about this, that, and the other, but just having a more transparent relationship with them from a younger age, I think, is important, and having them giving them some agency in their financial like well-being as well, and teaching them along the way like what it all means, and not just saying you can't spend this money, but being like, okay, like how do you want to save this money or
For
whatever.
sure. Yeah, I think, having the conversation up front allows people more space to share their struggles and ask for help. And so you want your kids, I'm thinking about myself in fifth grade, my mom picking me up and she says, how was your day, honey? And I say, good. I'm not sharing the struggles. But if I heard how my mom navigated fifth grade and then my mom comes and picks me up and I'll be like, Mom, that thing that you that happened to you happened to me today. Like, how do I navigate that? So I think money, the four B's, but money, or even having a
Through the
political.
four B's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Like, especially these days, people make politics their entire personality. We're always
We
counting
can we
what,
can
yeah.
cover that. This is a money and grief
No, but
podcast.
but
I
there
understand.
should be no such thing as a taboo topic, is
Yeah,
what I'm saying,
especially
because
with family.
especially with family, especially with grief, especially with money, especially in the age of social media where people really are just putting the best sides of themselves out there, like, challenge the norm. And um that's the biggest takeaway. Like, just put it all out there, because you never know what part of it will resonate with someone else who may be feeling really alone.
Yeah.
um
You mentioned the L word, legacy. This was not my dad's legacy. So in, one sentence, and you can think about it for a second, what does legacy mean to you?
Legacy to me is what you leave behind, of course, but how people talk about, like, the ways you still live on. And the most obvious way, I think, anyone who's not, some distinguished figure that has a building, erected in their honor, the most easy way people live on is how their loved ones talk about them and remember them and the stories they tell. And obviously, these are the stories I don't like to tell about my dad. My dad was always our biggest coach, quite literally. He was my brother's baseball and basketball coach. He was, believe it or not, I played basketball back in the day. And my dad was my coach as well. And off the field, too. My dad was always my biggest champion. Um, he really always pushed me to achieve my full potential. And a lot of who I am today and where I am today is due to him, um, and the good sides.
That's important. Legacy is how your loved ones talk about you when you're not there. It's important. As we wrap up here, I have one final question. So let's say someone comes to you and they're in a similar situation. They realize the person that they love has, not provided them for them in the way that they should have, or you believe they believe that they should have, as well as, now they're navigating grief and just lost that person. Um, what would be, something that you hang on your door before you leave every day, or write in a notepad, next to your bed? What would be that grief mantra, or those words of wisdom that you want to leave that person, our audience, with?
Like, do I say control the controllables? That's so lame, but I think it is just been the recurring theme to pop up tonight. And I also hate that it's like such corporate lingo, but it really is just what I take into so many different facets of life. Um, and I think it also helps you appreciate what you can and can't control. And just, again, having so much of what you can and can't control intertwined, that just taking power and control of your life and your relationships and your finances, it's just really empowering. And I think it also can bring peace in so many different ways. Um, it's what's helped me a lot of the way along the way. It's what's helped me a lot with just grappling with everything.
I love it. Hang it on your wall, put it next to your bed, control the controllables. I
You're
love
getting one for your birthday, a sign to put over your
it.
bed.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an incredible episode of The Currency of Grief. Ariana is, um, you know, volunteers her time with experience camps, and that's another major organization in her life. And she alluded to the week that she's able to, you know, remember her dad and all the good and the fond memories that he has brought into her life. And So that's a foundation that's near and dear to her heart. And I'm sure, I can link your personal LinkedIn and your Instagram to the bottom of the podcast in case anybody wants to reach out. But this has really been an incredible episode. I'm so grateful that you decided to join me on the Currency of Grief.
Honored to be invited and really just amazed by the space you created and the conversations you're starting. Thank you,
I
Justin.
appreciate you. Thank you so much, Ari. Thank you so much for everybody who chimed into this episode of the Currency of Grief. Don't forget, it's a great day to have a great day. So go have a great day. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Currency of Grief podcast. My hope is that today's conversation brought you clarity, comfort, and even a spark to start those difficult but necessary conversations in your own life. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with one other person who you feel this podcast could impact. And please, take a moment to leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us reach more people who need this resource. Remember, the best time to talk about death and money was yesterday. The second best time is now. Until next time, I'm Justin Weidenfeld, your Grief Financial Officer, and this has been the Currency of Grief podcast.